Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about the relationship between Fethullah Gulen and Erdogan, how they become allies and how they become enemies. To understand this, we will have to go a bit of background of the issue, which actually started why these two different strands of Islam is understanding what was their relationship, how they started to support each other, and then how they fell out. So, first of all, when Atatürk has established the modern Republic of Turkey, he banned most of all religious institutions, basically. And within this ban, most of religious institutions has actually shut down. But there are two proactive response has emerged among the Muslim community and especially the leaders. One is what we call civil Islam. They were aware of the persecution of Atatürk to the religious groups. They decided to form networks to serve society within the society. So they do a lot of grassroots work to help the society, but they stayed away from politics. They voted for political parties. They take part in elections as voters, but they didn't necessarily form parties or stayed away from parties. So in that time, in early ages, it was Said Nursi and Süleyman Hilmi Tunahan was the good examples of civil Islam. So Gulen falls in this category of civil Islam, who stays away from politics, who serves within the community by education, by dialogue, or by charity activities, and try to shape the society with these non-governmental organizations. But the origins of political Islamists falls into second category. Some religious scholars of Ottoman times decided to take part within this newly established nation state and use its instruments. So they wanted to take part and take role in the bureaucracy and help shaping society with their inputs in there. Initially to maybe do some damage control about the reforms and try to preserve religious institutions in one way, like Elmalı Hamdi Yazır, Ömer Nasuhi Bilmen, Ahmet Hamseki. These are some important people. They didn't become politicized until 1970s. In 1970, Erdogan changed this into a different form. He made it into a political party with the influence of course, the emerging political Islamism around the world. It was a collective search for an Islamic identity or even a way to try to establish an Islamic state. Democracy was a train, and you can get off whenever you reach your point, which is to establish your own system. So you can use the political means, the elections, to come into power and change the system, and that is the understanding of political Islamism. The main idea is to capture the state and use it to shape the society, make it a more Islamic, a better society. So it's a bit Jacobinian in that sense. And in that case, elections are census, like for Muslims, like a head count, how many Muslims, however many is voting for Erdogan, is that much Muslims, many Muslims live in the country. That was the understanding. So after 1998, Recep Tayyip Erdogan and some of his friends actually moved away from this political Islamism because they realized it wasn't going to be allowed by the secular Kemalist establishment with the military interventions and this and that. And they realized the identity politics actually consume a lot of the energy. So they decided to set up AK Party, which represent the rise of non-Islamism in politics. They refer themselves as Muslim Democrats, means they are Muslims, but they are Democrats in terms of their operation. So they advance the pro-European Union reforms. They prioritize the development and democracy and fight against poverty and freedoms. And they established a coalition with Kurds, liberals, Alevis, and civil Islam with Fethullah Gulen and other religious minorities, and bring them into their support. So, but what happened is this two terms of very successful developments in good economy, good relationship with the neighbor, pro-European Union reforms and everything. In the third term, things started to change. The revival of Islamism in Turkish politics has emerged. The legislations were, started to change. For instance, the reforms of European Union have slowed down. The criticism started to emerge. Politicians started to blame European Union for not being honest about their relation with Turkey. the increasing reference to Islamism, like for instance, the alcohol ban was introduced as part of like Islamicness rather than health and safety. The state started to encourage a religious youth, and anti-Western discourse has increased. The European Union and some other West countries started to be seen as conspiring to topple the government. Religious criticism over voting behavior has started again, like Erdogan did. For instance, if you're not voting for me, then what sort of a Muslim you are. And prospected Alevi reform, one of the Muslim minorities in Turkey, that has been stopped, and actually they fell out with the government. The peace process with PKK has initiated, but when it didn't turn out as a voting support, it stopped, and it became again a war with Kurds in the southeast region of Turkey. And Gezi Park protest has marked an important point in AK Parti's history in terms of how they were going to deal with the opposition voices and how they were going to listen to them or suppress them. So Gezi Park in that sense has happened. And then of course the corruption scandal in 17th of December 2013 that happened. So by this third term, there was a tension between Fethullah Gulen and his followers and Recep Tayyip Erdogan already. But with the 17th of December, Erdogan decided to actually blame these corruption allegations to the movement. He claimed that it was the movement's setup. There wasn't a corruption, like the 4 ministers were innocent, and this was all to topple his government again. So he managed to slow down and eventually stop the judicial process about the corruption scandal, and he won the elections the next couple of months later. But after all, because his votes didn't affect it so much, he continued to blame Gulen, and he promised in the elections to eradicate the Gulen movement. So at that point, it was stupid for a movement to still vote for Erdogan, because he's now promising actually effectively eradicating the movement and its activities in Turkey and stuff. I will be talking about this topic again, but simply this political Islam, which represented by Erdogan, and civil Islam, which we can say represented by Gulen, has found a common ground in pro-European Union reforms and democracy and struggle against poverty and this and that. And then it break up with the increasing authoritarianism and Islamization, like the emerging of that old political Islamist agenda again. And now they are quite far apart and quite highly critical of each other. Thank you very much.